Hello and welcome to Move the Line, presented by 4for4 Bets. I'm Ryan Noonan. We are back post-draft, cycling into all things NFL offseason, all things NFL futures, preseason, schedule, draft recap, futures, all the stuff that is coming. Excited to turn the page here and move forward and start talking about what to expect here on the field for the 2024 season. Joining me here, as always, Connor Allen. What's going on, bud?
Yeah, it was an interesting draft. I think that we didn't have our best performance out there in terms of the final results. The over-unders went well. Vegas refund absolutely crushed. So that was great to see in our Discord. I think 13-2, maybe something like that. And it's funny because I think one of the ones he lost was the Barton under. And I feel like we all felt really strong about that as well. But just absolutely crushed otherwise. Over-unders seem like they're the weakest market. I think we were 2-1 on those for ourselves and just missed on couple other things here and there, but overall, excited to get into the off season. We'll talk about some futures bets, probably go division by division eventually, and go from there.
Definitely some lessons learned in the draft. I mean, I think there's something to be said for maybe being too in the weeds, because if you think about like how that actually played out, and I wanted to look, and I'm just remembering now, but thinking about like the first mock put out. That I put out, I think probably mocks that you put out maybe, early in the process. Those were like kind of what happened, right? Like when we started to get a little too fancy, all these different trades, all these different scenarios here and this, what to believe this, previously, and again, we're not naming sources, no offense to the sources, previously really strong sources did not land necessarily this year. And all of a sudden you start to get just in it and like this becomes this. And all of a sudden you start to put all these trades in and there's just a domino effect in draft betting because things are correlated. There's, in mock drafts, all those things are correlated. So probably too in the weeds, man. I don't know. Like, I don't have it in me to like take a step back next year. I just know I won't when it comes to like March and April. Like it just, how can we unplug? But last year was, or last month, I guess, or last week, whatever it is now, it just feels like, man, changes. I would do some things differently, Connor. I would definitely do some things differently.
Yeah, I mean, we'll keep firing. I mean, I'm not scared.
I'm not firing betting wise. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, just is what it is. I will say, I think you brought up a good point with the like domino effect, and largely, I mean, it revolved around JJ McCarthy, right? Because JJ McCarthy going 3, which I think both of us had in our mocks, or even 4 or 5, like. I think that I was a bit more convinced that someone would trade up for him in that sense. And it almost reminded me, like I got this weird feeling in my gut, like an hour before the draft, like what if this is like the Tua Tagovailoa draft and Justin Herbert draft, where I believe they had picks like 4 and 5 or 5 and 6, something like that. And I was like, why would one of them not jump to 3 or 4 to make sure that they get the guy that they want? At least the Dolphins, who I think picked after the Chargers in the Justin Herbert draft. And it just didn't happen. They just sat there and they took their guy, and these guys just have stones of steel sometimes, and so it makes sense. And then all the Cardinals stuff, Jarecki, talking about neighbors over Marvin Harrison Jr., just pissed away some money there. Even if I didn't put much, we weren't buying it all draft cycle, and then heard a little bit more about it later. So I don't know. I think that tightening up the sources, tightening up the info as well makes a ton of sense. And then the back half of the first round was just like, I mean, absolutely wild with Ricky Pearsall and the Panthers trading up for Leggett, which we'll talk about more throughout the show. But just like some wild picks, I think, the back half of the first round.
For sure. And, maybe overfitting some stuff too. And I think you make a good point. The Cardinals was one for sure. It was like, well, why would they stay at 4? They can move out. They're just sitting on, I was convinced that the Cardinals don't pick at 4. It made a ton of sense for them to pick 4 and just be like, you know what? We got just a shit ton of capital. We need alphas. We talked about that too. Like this team needs some blue chip prospects on the team. They executed that plan. Made a ton of sense to be able to back down, but they didn't have to because they had a ton of picks anyway. So it's not like they needed more picks. Like at a certain point, you just got to stay home and draft guys. Maybe overfitting too. It was like, well, Joe Alt, left tackle, doesn't make a ton of sense for the Chargers. They have a left tackle. They need right tackle help. They could trade down and get a right tackle. Just like, all right, we're just going to stay home and take Alt too. So like right away, it's like no McCarthy. No trade at 4, no trade at 5. The chalk guys that made sense to go there weren't thinking too hard, I guess, did go there, and I was already in shambles.
Well, I want to talk about that then real quick. The alt, because the alt Latham kind of like domino was really interesting because the Chargers at 5 picked a guy in Joe Alt that predominantly plays left tackle. They already have Rashawn Slater, so one of them
Right.
has to go over to right tackle. And then the Titans at 7 picked J.C. Latham, a right tackle. When all offseason they've been saying the guys that like, there's been like 2 or 3 guys. They're like, oh, we view him as like a right tackle. I don't remember their names off the top of my head, but like they had kind of some help there, but they had like nothing in left tackle, like straight up nothing. And J.C. Latham, like, is predominantly a right tackle at Alabama, who probably can play left tackle, but like it wasn't just like a sure thing. And so I thought it was very interesting how like positionally, I mean, I guess they'll figure it out, but like it just didn't really seem to go how we thought there at all. Because I don't know. I guess the Latham pick, even though we knew he was going to go high, just didn't think he was going to go that high. Given like the fit with the Titans, didn't make a ton of sense in my mind.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing with the alt thing. There was more of that, and it's just like, well, are we overthinking it? Yeah, there's just a few of those that were frustrating for sure. So, yeah, I mean, look, there was some part of it was like I felt so good about McCarthy being top 5, and we not only had him as a top 5 pick, but I just banged a bunch of exactas that like basically wheeled anything that involved that. And when it's so over my skis on that, and it's like, well, no, that is not happening again. So yeah, Scott Smith, we miss you. Scott in the chat. We miss you from draft season. Scott's an absolute stud, and of course, goes out and has another strong finish in the mock streets there for Scott. So not surprising, absolute stud at what he does there. So,
by the way, too, I don't know if you saw this. So it was like Mock Draft Database compiles all the best mock drafts and the worst ones. And so I was 59th out of 59 in the Mock Draft Database this year, and so only up from here. That's a good sign.
yeah.
It was great though, because the second worst was Stephen Shea from Barstool, and they put it on the screen like on one of their Barstool shows, like the Yak or whatever. And so he was obviously getting roasted, but they're like, who's the guy who came in last? Like, what a moron. Like, how much worse could you do? And so that's me. And so it's my mentions are still buzzing, from people adding Shea about that. And thankfully, I mean, I just came out and embraced it. I don't know. Bad year happens, only up from here.
Yeah. It was trades too, right? Just too many trades and nonsense. Yeah. Lessons learned. Let's talk about it. Who do kind of today we'll touch on, drafts that we think went well. Again, this is always an interesting process, right? And you at this point have probably read draft reviews and draft grades. We're not here to grade drafts. And I think some people are like, well, you can't really grade a draft until a couple of years in and we see who these guys are and such. And I understand that, but at the same time, I also think you can think about process in terms of drafting. You can think about, value on, consensus big boards. And again, some teams, consensus big boards aren't necessarily the sharpest thing out there. But if you, reach on a guy that you probably could take with your next pick, or is like, 30 to 50 picks off of most consensus big boards, you probably reached in terms of, perceived value for that player. So I think it is a worthwhile process. And more importantly for us in terms of now that we're not talking about betting on the draft, how does this play out in the current future markets? Win totals are posted. Divisional odds are posted. Obviously, you can bet on conference, Super Bowl, all that stuff. We're getting some player stuff out there. Obviously, we'll devote a little bit more time specifically to player futures, whether that's the awards market, all that stuff. We'll get into that all as the off season goes along. But let's touch briefly on who do we think drafted well and who maybe missed the mark a little bit. So I'll let you go anywhere you want. Start with a bad team, start with a good team. We'll kick it around back and forth and just talk about how we thought some of these teams did during the draft.
I'm trying to be a little bit more optimistic. So we'll start with some good teams. I'll start with the Chicago Bears, hometown team here. Drafted Caleb Williams, drafted Rome Odunze. I thought that's just like a slam dunk duo. I think both you and I were convinced that Odunze would not be there. It took, it took JJ McCarthy essentially not going there, Michael Penix going 8, and the Titans not trading out at 7 and taking J.C. Latham. I mean, that, in my mind, pretty crazy run of scenarios there for that to happen. And they land Odunze. I mean, it's one of those things where the Bears defense played really well down the stretch last season. And then now they have an offense that I think should be more than capable. Like, I already in my mind am projecting them to be a top 10 offense for this season, which sounds crazy, but I'm just there. Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze, DJ Moore, reasonably good offensive line. DeAndre Swift, Khalil Herbert can, bang in some touchdowns if he needs. Like, they just have everything that I think makes a good team at this point. So I think the issue is like the odds, I think, have already caught up with a lot of that. They're about even money to make the playoffs. Their win total is like 8.5 juiced or 9 even, depending on where you look. I think that's about right. I think that my favorite way to play it would be like Bears to just win the division outright for a little bit more. So, I mean, again, it's tough competition, but I do like them to make the playoffs as well, because I think that they're just this really strong NFC team at this point.
3 receivers all complement each other very well, which is, I think, an important piece too, right? It's not like there's obviously overlapping skill sets, but I think that they all can complement each other very well. And now when you move on from whatever you get from Keenan Allen here, moving forward, you're still going to have a young duo. DJ Moore is still young, came in young, and, to build around that. I was the whole time kind of holding on, like offensive line. I don't know that was I was glad that they didn't, address that early in the draft. They did in like the 3rd round and made a splash there with the kid out of Yale. I don't want to butcher his name, but he got hurt like late in the season. A lot of people thought he was like, a late second type of prospect too. So really strong, coming out of Yale, not great competition, but I think upside, a guy that could play maybe tackle or guard position for them. So then they traded back in the 5th round and added Austin Booker out of Kansas, who was, I thought, an interesting edge prospect that should probably go in the 3rd round in day 2. He fell all the way to 144, I think. I don't have it up here, but he was like top 70, I think, in PFF's big board. Not just like really good athletic prospect, and edge was an area of need for them, and just another interesting selection for them. So yeah, as you mentioned, division strong. Lions I can like roll into the Lions as a team that had a great draft. Mm-hmm. Lions are good, had a great draft, and are very interesting. Packers, really good draft, youngest team in the league, supplemented and did really well in the draft again. So the division continues to trend up. I like what Minnesota did. I think that they've had a nice offseason. I think they've been very interesting. If, McCarthy or Sam Darnold can hit the ground running, they're probably the 4th team in the division, but that's a pretty strong 4th team in the division that can go toe-to-toe and really beat any of those other teams. Now, the Bears' edge is the schedule. And you look at the strength of schedule, it is soft. I love to look at the unique 3. So something we touched on the last handful of years. All these teams, for the most part, now home and away is different. Obviously, you play everyone in your own division, home and away. The NFC North plays the NFC West and the AFC South. So pretty middling in terms of division strength, top to bottom there. The Bears, though, they're unique 3. They play home to New England, home to Carolina, and at the Commanders. That's nice. way, way softer than anything else. Like the Lions is at Dallas, home to Buffalo, and Tampa. Right? That's not like a world beater per se. And all of these teams really kind of have relatively soft, unique 3s. But the Bears, New England, Carolina, and the Commanders, that's not super challenging, right? So whatever you think of those teams, they're probably on the outside of the playoff picture. So yeah, I mean, it's hard not to be optimistic, as you said, probably baked in at this point. But I mean, look, as we touched on, we're local, we're not Bears fans, neither of us, but we're definitely tied in. And what's been interesting to me talking with Bears fan friends of late is they don't believe it. Like they not that they don't believe it, but they're just so pessimistic. They are ready to just for Caleb Williams to not be the guy. And something's going to happen here. There's no way that this is going to happen, because in all the years that they've ever been good, it's never been the offense. It's always defense.
They've never had a good quarterback. I mean, Caleb Williams is the best prospect that they've ever had a quarterback. Not close. It's literally not close. I mean, maybe he doesn't wind up being the best Bears quarterback ever, but it's a really low bar. I mean, these Justin Fields was the most exciting quarterback they'd ever had prior. And Justin Fields is now might be playing special teams for the Steelers. I mean, this is hilarious, by the way it worked out. But yeah, talking to Bears fans, they're all like, oh, well, we'll see. I mean, they should be jumping for joy. This is like a miracle that this happened. This is incredible.
I'm fired up. I can't wait to watch Bears games. And they're oh, we'll see. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. It's it's wild. I guess. I mean, they've never had a 4,000-yard passer. And they've never had anyone throw for 30 touchdowns. And like in this day and age, they're not nothing, but they're not astronomical thresholds. Caleb could do that this year. And again, I know that that's like, on the higher end, I guess, of his range of outcomes, but like with this group, if everyone stays healthy, which is a caveat that you can make for handicapping any team. Yeah, I mean, it's wild. It's wild that the Bears fans are so pessimistic. It'll be interesting to see. But yeah, hard to not pick them as one of the teams that had an absolute home run of a draft, even though they did not have a full allotment of picks from other stuff. So good draft for them. I also really liked what Cincinnati did. I think Cincinnati had a really nice draft. Marius Mims in the first. You obviously protecting Joe Burrow makes a ton of sense. I was back and forth because I thought they could make a case for them to go defensive line in the first round, but they did that in the second round with Chris Jenkins out of Michigan. How I like is not like necessarily a home run prospect, but just really solid interior, pound for pound guy that could play 3 downs for that team. I think is going to be pretty nice for them. I think the upside with Jermaine Burton as a speed guy, with whatever's going on with T. Higgins, obviously having to replace, Tyler Boyd. So adding a little bit more elements to bolster that passing offense. And they double tap tight end. Tight end's been a problem for them. Eric All, coming out of, tight end University of Iowa, All is like not a lot of snaps, but like yards per route run off the charts, kind of a freak athlete. I think he's really interesting. Like some of the other guys that they've added like late. So I think there's a lot of upside to Cincinnati. And they're another team, when you look at schedule wise in the division, significantly easier schedule than the rest of their divisional foes. Ravens 29th in strength of schedule. And this is using, projected win totals. Ravens 29th, Browns 30th, Steelers 32nd. So 3 of the 4 toughest schedules in the league. The Bengals are at 6. The unique 3, again, New England is involved. Again, Carolina is involved. And then they're also at Tennessee. So that is a significantly easier schedule than some of their, like the Ravens, Buffalo, Houston, at Tampa Bay. Like that's way harder. So I think the Ravens or the Bengals are going to be better again if they can keep Joe Burrow upright. I think they did well. So any thoughts there?
No, they addressed their needs, especially double tapping defensive tackle, double tapping tight end, adding the offensive tackle with Mims, who's I guess like has a lot of upside. So it makes sense. I'm excited to see them. The Burton pick makes sense, but I want to see more Andre Iosivas.
Sure.
I think he's kind of good. I think he's kind of a fun player. So I'm interested to see how their 3 wide receiver sets break down because they play a ton of 11. So I'm interested to see what that looks like. I think, T's going to be here, going to be a Bengal for at least a year, right? I would assume. Yep. Probably. Unless something happens mid-season. But I don't know. I'm just excited to see more of that. But I know Burton does have a lot of upside. So we'll see that with them. I think they're just a tough team to predict because I think we're looking at there's a total out there for the Bengals, 11 wins even on Caesars. That kind of seems high. I like the Bengals, but 11 wins even is a lot.
I hate that Caesars does that too. I hate that they give us flat win totals.
Yeah, because sure, could they win 10 games, 11 games? Yeah, but like 12 games, we're talking about like a stellar season in an awesome division. But like you mentioned, there are some good scheduling stuff for them. So it's probably a stay away from me, but 11 flat to me just seemed pretty high for a team that I don't know. There's just a lot of competition there.
For sure. Yeah, I think obviously all the 3 other teams in the division are strong. They play the AFC West, which means a trip. I believe it's a road game to Kansas City. Then also at Dallas, I believe, in there because they play the NFC East as well. So again, get the Commanders, you get the Giants. There are wins on the schedule. But yeah, 11 is tough because you got to get to 12. And I like the Bengals, but that would probably be a tough sell. All right, what else do you like here? What other teams, or you like or you don't like? Whoever you want to talk about.
Yeah, we'll go to some losers here. I'm going to go with the Broncos being a loser here. Bo Nix at 12th overall, I think is just downright horrendous. I get it if you're taking your quarterback of the future, but came out later. No one else had a round 1 grade on Bo Nix other than the Broncos. I don't disagree with that necessarily. If you watch any of his games at Oregon, like it was all just like scheme stuff. I remember vividly watching some of the games and being like, this is just horrible watch, because it's not like real football. They're just throwing screens. They're, run and shoot. It's just like, it was very strange. And I think that Bo Nix came in like to college as like a pretty heralded prospect, and like he has some tools, but not really, honestly. I just thought he was like, it's going to be a very strong litmus test of Sean Payton. Like, how much does the scheme matter? And then the Broncos, I mean, still have some whole questions at safety, linebacker, pass rush, secondary outside of Pat Surtain. Like, I mean, Damari Mathis could still be in the fold. I mean, he was 126 out of 127 per PFF last year in corner grade. I mean, he was downright trash. And then they paired Bo Nix with Troy Franklin, who I think was a good pick, relative to like what we expected. But now their receiving core is just like the biggest bunch of Jags ever. I mean, it's just like Cortland Sutton. I mean, he's fine. Possession receiver, I guess, at this point. Like, Marvin Mims could be something, but like could barely crack the field last year. And then now you have Troy Franklin, who again, like, he was like a third, fourth round pick. Like, he's not going to be coming and be like an alpha on day one. So I don't know. It seems like in my mind, Sean Payton has overplayed his hand here of like, I'm Sean Payton. I can make anything work as long as I have the right guys that fit my system. And this is gonna be a great test of that. So we'll see it here, because I mean, they won 8 games last year, which is crazy to look back on. I tweeted this out today. They beat they beat the Packers, they beat the Chiefs, they beat the Bills, they beat like all these good teams, and then lost to some terrible ones because they had a string of turnover luck, like 10 turnovers in 3 games against the Vikings, Bills, and Browns midseason. So
insane.
Yeah. Disaster.
I remember talking about it at the time. It was like the most, because it was something that I think it might have been Solak. I think someone at the Ringer wrote about the most EPA gained from turnovers in like a 5-game stretch ever. But like not by a little bit, but like almost double anything anyone's ever done from a like EPA gained from turnovers. So yeah, super unsustainable was the reason we were looking week to week to kind of fade them after that happened. After they got over like the Miami thing where it was like, all right, some of their statistics are just completely out of whack because they just got absolutely dominated and gave up 70 and all that stuff that happened there. But I really respect the work that Mike Clay does over at ESPN. He has this as the second worst roster in the league. They are 29th offensively, 29th defensively, and then overall 31st from a unit grade standpoint. It's just not a really good football team. And I don't think either of us think Bo is a talent elevator at this point. So kind of middling everywhere else. The offensive line's okay. And that's really the unit that's that I think is kind of worth its weight. So going to be a tough season in a division that I think is interesting. And obviously you have the defending Super Bowl chance in there as well. So yeah, Bo Nix, good luck, my friends. It's going to be
6 flat at Caesars right now. It's plus money on Thunder 5.5 at some shops, 6 flat at Caesars. I mean, again, I think more often than not, they're probably in the 4, 5, 6, 7 range. But like getting to 7 to me seems like a top end kind of outcome here, or like the Raiders are just like absolute dog shit, or maybe the Chargers don't pan out too. But I kind of think the Chargers are going to be good. And the Raiders, I have no idea. I mean,
yeah, Broncos 2, unique 3. Indy, again, going to be a different unit, obviously, with Anthony Richardson, the future offensive player of the year.
For
sure. At the Jets, which obviously, we're banking on Rodgers, but should be better. And then, that's a west to east trip, and then at Seattle, which, Seattle, they could probably a little bit better than Denver. Seattle, not always an easy place to play. So those aren't 3 layups for a team with a bottom schedule per se. So they're getting kind of a rough run of it there. So I'm with you on the Broncos being kind of down. Let's see. I'll pick a down one. Who else was I down on? I didn't like what Miami did. Mostly, I didn't like the Chop Robinson pick in the first round, and I just think they have a ton of needs, and I think one of those needs is along the defensive line. But I think maybe even like interior defensive line. You're going to get some of these. Jaden Phillips is going to come back. Chop was like an absolute stud in shorts and a t-shirt. But just the production was never really there. I think he's an exciting prospect, but like when you need a guy like this to probably come in, like you're making that pick, hoping he hits the ground running. Like, I don't know. You got Bradley Chubb, you got Jalen Phillips. They're coming back. Yes, you got like an upside situational pass rusher, but like this offensive line is terrible. And this offense and everything that they do from a speed and Tua accuracy standpoint is predicated on protecting Tua. And the offensive line is rough. Now they added Patrick Paul in the second round, and I think he could be okay. Maybe they just had a higher grade on him and they knew that they could get him in the second round, and maybe they're right. But like, I just think that there are other ways for them to address it than chop. Some of the other stuff is just, I think, a lot of high upside athletes that I don't think are like Jalen Wright in the fourth. You didn't have a third round pick and you take another speed running back. Is that really what this team needs? I don't know. Like, it's fun. And like, yeah, you got another dude to line up. Like, you could pass the baton to for your, 200-meter relay, but like, to win football games, I don't know that without a third round pick that you needed a fourth round running back. So yeah, Miami a little bit down on I worry about them keeping Tua upright.
Yeah, no, that's totally fair. I think that should have been the number one priority. They probably should have done like 3 offensive linemen in the middle rounds here. Instead, they picked
What
one.
Pittsburgh did, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I like Pittsburgh's draft. I mean, Pittsburgh is going to go full boomer ball, like this year, and they leaned into it, address their offensive line more. We don't know how they're going to do, but anyways, yeah, Miami, like the Jalen Wright pick, like you have Devin Achane, you have Raheem Mostert, who's super fast, a little bit more, I guess, in between the tackles. Jeff Wilson probably is somewhere, around. Jalen Wright, like now it just doesn't really make sense. Like, and then you have all these other guys who are fast in the team. Like it just doesn't add up to me. Like why you would waste a 4th round pick on him. Like, I don't know. Just like best case, he's Devin Achane and you have 2 of them, I guess. I don't know. Like to me, like they need a more like functional offense of like consistency. Not like the big play all the time or like, having 6 guys moving around the line of scrimmage. Like they need like something that they can rely on when that shit doesn't work. And when it didn't work, they just were stuck. Like they just had nothing else left. And so, yeah, I kind of agree with you on Miami here. I do want to talk about Scott Smith here, mentioned in the comments. Feels like Dallas has backfilled some positions and missed filling some holes, adding some stuff, some scheme changes. I like under 10.5 wins. Yeah, Dallas's draft was interesting because they traded back when they got Guyton, and then like really just didn't do much else after. Marshawn Kneeland, edge, Cooper Beebe, guard in the 3rd round, and then Maris Liafu, a linebacker. I would assume that's so that they can have another linebacker after Leighton Vander Esch retired. I don't know. I think it's fine. I guess I don't really feel too strong about it either way. And I think that's probably to Scott's point. Like they have guys who are like fringe starters, but they didn't really make any high impact plays. And like now we're like basically in full hindsight of the offseason. Jerry Jones's "we're going all in" comments are even funnier because they literally did the opposite of go all in, considering they made no splash in free agency and then traded back in the 1st round to get a guy who's like, Guyton could be fine, but it's not like he was like some heralded offensive line prospect or anything.
Right. Yeah. No, I'm with you on that one too. And like, I didn't like that. I had Dallas on the list of teams that I was like, a couple of teams that were like Denver too, were like, not great teams. The linebacker pick was weird. I think other linebackers, I think significantly better that went around, like right around him or significantly later. They've added some guys there too. They added Eric Kendricks. They played small last year. Those guys are back. They took, Overshown out of Texas last year, who is coming back. Like this guy is like linebacker 5. You drafted a special teams guy and like a linebacker 5 in the 3rd round when you have some needs. And very, very interesting draft. Like the teams, they're going to need linebackers. Their defensive front is still pretty poor. Like up front, they obviously edge rusher is fantastic when you have Micah Parsons, DeMarcus Lawrence. They added Kneeland, another rotational guy, but like the problem was up front last year. Remember, like their splits with Jonathan Hankins on and off the field were pretty drastic, and they've added nothing to that room. It is a small, undersized front that is going to be like, we're going to look at some running back props, I think, week in and week out against Dallas because their teams are going to be able to, I think, have some success up front against them. So yeah, Scott makes a good call. 10.5's a lot. You're putting a lot of pressure on Dak in a year where, he's probably knows he's playing for an extension. It's just kind of a weird dynamic at Dallas this year.
Yeah, no, totally agree there with that one. And then Colt mentioned, is there a better bet than Tony Pollard under 8.5 rushing yards? Yeah, there is. It's Xavier Legette under 7.5 receiving yards. But
there you go. We'll seamlessly brought up in the show.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it had to be. Well, all right, we'll start with Pollard. Pollard, I think this is fine. I mean, he was kind of banged up last year. Like now he's going to split time, in Tennessee. I think there's massive questions about the offensive line. There's massive questions about the receiving core. There's, massive. I would say like it's, or I guess not the receiving core with Will Levis. So it's like, how functional is the offense? If the offense is functional, like Tony Pollard needs to be efficient because he's not going to be a workhorse. Even if he is a workhorse, he's shown that he's not necessarily efficient as a workhorse. So it's like that balance of like, I think it's about right. I'd probably lean under, but I'm not like running to bet it at this point. I don't know, Noonan, any Tony Pollard thoughts?
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, we probably lean under as well. I think we'll get into that at some point. Like your best bet, especially in May, at firing at some of the stuff would be to lean under on season long props. There's just so many outs on the under. You'd have to feel like you have a massive edge or find a really bad number to take an under, a strong stance on an under. Doesn't mean you can't cash those. You just have to run hotter than the sun to make sure you're getting basically 17 games out of these guys, and they also hit above expectation of what they're looking to do in a lot of instances. So yeah, I mean, just process wise, under makes a lot of sense. I'm with you on Levis. I think what's interesting is we all have like that first game against Atlanta in our mind where like we just connected on all these bombs and you're like, damn, that was it. There was no more of that there's no more of that. I'm not saying that they can't do more of it, but like there was no more of that on the film last year. It was really bad. There was some really bad stuff. Now, again, the supporting cast was poor. The offensive line was poor. And you could make a case that the play calling was as well. And they've obviously done some stuff to revamp the supporting cast, address the offensive line, or at least try to start doing that to bring in obviously a new coach, the Callahan crew. And it'd be interesting to see what happens there. But yeah, I'm not super bullish on Pollard, so I would lean under, but I don't feel super strong. Like you said, I'm not rushing to hammer that yet.
Yeah,
So.
but the Leggett one I thought was really good. I mean, we gave that out today. First official play at 700.5, and it's like minus 160 now on DraftKings and 600 on Caesars. If you can get anything down to MGM, it's there, and then on some price per head shops as well, it was available. So I was able to get down a solid pop there on Leggett. I mean, we're talking about a guy who was like a non-traditional late breakout because he had some weird stuff happen in like late high school, early college. He transitioned from quarterback to wide receiver early in his career, but he did not clear 160 receiving yards till he was a senior. Matt Harmon's reception perception had him as a 19th percentile separator against man coverage, which I've heard is not good. And on top of that is his profile of like guys who break out, basically average more than 60 yards in his final year and less than I think it's 35 previously. Scott Barrett pulled this together. Like the comps are just disastrous. I mean, like it's like basically gadget guys or like guys who just aren't consistent. And so now you're putting him in a spot where Dave Canales wants to run a bunch. We know that he's talked about it. They keep adding more and more running backs to the room that they don't necessarily even need, I don't think. And then they have Adam Thielen, they have Deontay Johnson. So what? Like they talked about using him like an end rounds and sweeps and stuff too. And like screens, like, I mean, he might catch 50, 60 balls for like 500 yards, but like, that's like best case scenario. You know what I mean? That's like a best case scenario. So I don't know. I thought that to me was very surprising given how, I mean, just Bryce Young was also playing like poverty level last year. He was terrible.
It wasn't great. I like some of the stuff from Xavier Legette, but like he is like swimming against stream for all the reasons you said, just in terms of historical comps and late breakout stuff. Like again, whatever, 24 years old and to break out. And again, like we're in a kind of a weird thing too. Like he did have some things that led to that are a little bit non-traditional, with family stuff. But then like, we also have the COVID, like this is kind of the last of the COVID stuff. So like, but still like wasn't doing much beforehand. And obviously the stuff from Matt Harmon is not super encouraging, though. Like the PFF grade on 10 plus yard throws was pretty elite, which is interesting considering his separation stuff isn't good. So they added Deontay Johnson as well. So like, at least they now have somewhat of a NFL caliber wide receiver room. It's not as bad as New England still. So like, it's better. Like the bar is pretty low, but I mean, 700 is a rich line for him. But yeah, Carolina, I thought had a not terrible draft. I liked Jatavion Sanders, a 4th-round tight end, I think is interesting. Like Jonathan Brooks coming off of an ACL injury, you have all these needs. Like, do you need another running back? Like, you have a couple on the roster. It seemed to be okay last year. Still, I don't know why that decision was made. And Trevin Wallace, the linebacker from Kentucky, I think Michael Barrett, who they took in the 7th round out of Michigan, is better than Wallace. Now, Wallace is a far superior athlete, but really, I mean, has some like splash plays on the tape, but like just run defense grade, not great. Coverage grade, significantly below average. If you can't cover at linebacker nowadays, like this is not, as Dago would love to tell you, this is not like 1998 with neck rolls. Like you have to cover at linebacker nowadays, so it is not like a benefit. You just don't see a lot of teams running, out or 1st and 2nd down thumpers. That's just, and that's not something he does well anyway. So you can't be a speed athletic freak and not be able to cover. So yeah, just a weird draft from a team that like is just in desperate need for talent on both sides of the ball. Kind of some misses there. So
yeah, and they traded up to get Leggett too, and then to get into the 1st round to get him. I don't know, man. I just like, yeah, like they're obviously he tested well and all that stuff, but like there's just so many other red flags there that don't make sense to me with that. And then
the one thing with that is in the new CBA with that 5th-year option at receiver, if he ends up being a dude,
then
that ends up being a benefit. Like the way the
Right.
CBA switched, some of those things are more beneficial for other positions. It used to be quarterback, and now that's really not the case of quarterback. Like it's actually a problem with quarterback, especially if you want to keep the guy, you got to extend him. So.
Yeah, I also do like Jonathan Brooks. I think he's actually like a solid prospect. It's just like
Yes.
in the context of your team, it just makes you just so much. You need so much else. Like what are you doing taking a running back off an ACL? Like I think he's a great play in like the prop market, probably mid-season after he gets rolling. He'll be a great play, and like I don't know, maybe some even like long shot futures potentially and fantasy and stuff like that. I think he's a good look, but like I mean, God, like it's just bad real life pick.
Yeah, probably a great dynasty pick, right? If you're playing dynasty fantasy, that's not what the show is. So yeah, that's not that at all. So, who else you got? Anything else you want to highlight?
Yeah, I think a couple more teams real quick. What did you think of the Bills draft? Because I wasn't sure about Keon Coleman, but I don't know. I go back and forth on them.
Yeah, Bills I thought were kind of middle of the pack. I like Cole Bishop, and they think they're going to need him. I think he was going to be someone that our 4for4 subscribers are going to get to know, because I think he's a kind of a thumper, likes to put his nose in there, and I fall in love with safeties in corners that are willing to be active run game stoppers. So I think Bishop is interesting. Another like some late stuff I think is okay, but Keon Coleman I think was a pure like definitely hot or cold. You either really liked him or thought like he just wasn't special separator. Speed stuff wasn't great. They seem to like him. I think social media stuff has made him endearing. I think unintentionally, the unintentional comedy scales are pretty high with Keon Coleman, but not a team that I love.
He's like a 15-year-old kid in like a 19-year-old or 20-year-old's body. Like literally, he's just like a little goofball, which he's funny. I just don't know how much that's going to matter. I mean, like, because obviously they lost Gabe Davis, they lost Stephon Diggs. Like I feel like Keon Coleman's just gonna be running a lot of wind sprints out there and just kind of like eating up coverage, while Kincaid, Shakir, Curtis Samuel, like all kind of just eat over like in the middle of the field. Because Josh Allen, I mean, he's done a great job like evolving his game and like being able to play in the middle of the field. And so I don't know. At least that's what kind of where in my mind where I'm at with him. But I mean, who knows? Maybe he ends up being way better. So I thought that was an interesting one. And then I mean, we have to talk about the Falcons real quick.
We sure do. Yeah.
Drafting Michael Penix at 8, I think deserves the entire staff should just be fired right now. I think immediately, like on the spot, fired. I understand what they're talking about with contingency plan, but you have very short windows to go all in on things. And like you have very small times, and drafting like a difference making pass rusher or Rome Odunze, and like really emphasizing the edge that you have, like I think will massively, massively help your team. Way more than drafting a guy like Michael Penix, 4 season-ending injuries. Frankly, was just a very slightly above average prospect to begin with, even if you take out the injuries. I don't know. I think taking Michael Penix at 8, if you didn't have Kirk Cousins, is probably not great, but fine. But the fact that you just guaranteed at least 2 years of Kirk Cousins, and you have an opportunity to win, the division's very wide open. Like, I don't know, you're just cutting yourself off the legs, I think. And like, you're raising the floor, but you're lowering the ceiling a lot, given the draft capital you have, at least in my mind.
1,000%. I understand what people are trying to do when giving at least a more measured take on it, because obviously it is the most important position. But yeah, you got to think of like where you're actually at. So you have to step back, and like they referenced, there was the Green Bay model. Like, okay, well, that was like pick 26 or something like that, pick 27 for Jordan Love. You're 8, and the dynamic that you touched on too briefly, which I think really matters, is you're in a division that is wide open for the taking. And like no one really wanted to win that division last year. And like Tampa did, and I think Tampa had a great draft. But they brought back Baker. This division is there for the taking, and like you're locked in on at least 2 years of Cousins. Cousins, I think we agree, is good or underrated or above average quarterback that can level up the talent that they have. It's a good offensive line. They haven't really had anyone that can maximize some of the offensive weapons that they've added. They've been untraditional in the first round for the last handful of years. I'm going to double down with like, if he doesn't play for 5 years, that means it's a good problem to have. It's like, oh, that is so broken. Like, yes, if you don't have an answer quarterback, you don't have an answer to anything. And then the Penix age issue, I think, is another element to it. Obviously, like coming into, by the time he would play it all, is going to be 27 years old. That's not great. You're gonna have to make a decision on extending a guy on his second deal into his like 30s, a guy who has had 4 seasons end with like knee and shoulder injuries, who played with 3 receivers that got drafted in the top 100 picks, both of his tackles within the top like 64 picks. So this guy performed really well, but played with a ton of talent, obviously. Like comparatively, like look what Drake May and Caleb Williams had going on. Like there's a lot of hero ball on the tape because there's not a lot of guys that were drafted, especially skill position guys or offensive players from USC and North Carolina in this year's draft, where Penix's entire crew got drafted. So yeah, I mean, just a abysmal pick. And again, you kind of alienate your like new big money free agent signing before you even play. It's such a bad process. And Rook, Coro, whoever they in the second round, 35th pick, like the only good thing you have is interior defensive linemen basically on your team, and you need edge rushers and you need some other guys. And look, they went D-line, edge, D-line with their next 3 picks. But like Rook is he's like the linebacker I was just talking about. There's a lot of like athletic testing that's interesting there, but he never produced at a high level at all. Like sub 50 percentile pass rush grade on true pass sets, according to PFF. Clemson, he went to Clemson, tested well. So obviously like a good pedigree and a good athlete and a good player in terms of like what you think he could be, but like way better guys on the board for you to trade up. They traded up 8 spots to take him. So like, again, just really, really, really bad start, I think, to the draft for Atlanta. And I mean, they take JD, Bertrand, linebacker under Notre Dame. Like that is a special teamer at best. Like it's just not a great draft for Atlanta. So yeah, they were the low hanging fruit for sure, but they needed to be discussed.
Yeah, no, I mean, just complete disaster, top to bottom, and I still think they're going to win the division. So I mean, they're very happy.
I agree
with winning 8 to 11 games for as long as possible. Like that's just, I mean, this is what this is telling us. They want to stay in that range. They want to stay competitive. They want to, maybe flirt with an NFC Championship game if they have a couple. They run hot maybe for a game, and then they're just going to get shit on by the best team in the NFC. I mean, it's just borderline inevitable, for years to come, and that's exactly what this pick's telling us. Which maybe that's what the owner wants. Just like, hey, let's just stay competitive, sell tickets. Let's be in the hunt every year and call it a day. I mean, you're never going to be a superpower, but it just is what it is, which sucks. But I mean, whatever. It's kind of like, I don't know. It seems kind of weak-minded in my mind. It's kind of lame.
Don't love it. Anyone else you want to highlight? I'll buzz through a couple that I like too. Anything else you got?
No, you can roll through a couple.
I think maybe Pittsburgh had the best drafts in general. We kind of touched on it. Trey Fontenot at 20. just a massive fit. Zach Frazier, who we had discussed a lot on the draft show, like some people thought he was sneaking in the first round. But again, just to look at their roster and go, yeah, you know what? We need interior offensive line help and we need help at tackle. Who cares? Like, just address the needs. They go ahead and do that with their first 2 picks. Great start. They also drafted Mason McCormick in the 4th round, a guard from San Diego State. Everyone talked about him as being like just mean, which I think is when you're like drafting a guard or, you know, interior offensive lineman, like I kind of want that. Like I definitely want that to be early, just a mean dude in the trenches. Roman Wilson, receiver from Michigan, like Pittsburgh just hits on these guys and people really like Roman Wilson. If you watched Michigan, yeah, loved it. I mean, like they didn't throw a ton, but I think that dude caught like their first 8 touchdown passes of the season this past year. Like he was the guy. And I think he's really good. Peyton Wilson, linebacker from NC State. Peyton Wilson, like no ACL in one of his knees. He's got a bum shoulder. He might be a 1 contract guy, but Peyton Wilson is going to be awesome for as long as he plays. I don't know that he's going to be able to play much this year. They run a lot of single linebacker stuff. They gave Patrick Queen the bag. But Peyton Wilson is exciting prospect from a size and speed standpoint, can cover. There's a lot to like there. Again, probably doesn't play 10 years in the league, but when he's on the field, he's impactful. Pittsburgh does this with linebackers as well. Even Ryan Watts out of Texas, I thought was a guy that could be like a 4th round pick, a big corner out of Texas who is pretty skilled, pretty physical. They get him with like, you know, pick 200 or something like that. I think Pittsburgh had an absolute home run of a draft. The Lions and Eagles with corners, just another team that did kind of what Pittsburgh did and said, hey, these are some issues for us. You know, like Philadelphia has a couple now, but long-term with Darius Slay and James Bradbury, they're on the last year of their deal. They're both in their early 30s. To get Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean and kind of just build up right away is really nice. I don't know how much those guys play this year. They can play a little bit. Obviously, Cooper DeJean has the ability to play safety as well if they need to. Home run for the Eagles, the Lions too, Terrion Arnold, Manus Rickshaw. They got this kid, Sion Vaki. Have you heard of this guy at all? The kid from Utah?
A little bit. What's his deal?
So he came in, he played linebacker and running back at Utah. Everyone thought he was going to be a safety. I'm sorry, safety and running back. Everyone thought he was going to be a safety. They announced him as a running back. And they said that he tested for them. He did full-on tests for them for all the positions. Had like 40-something carries at running back, and that's it. They drafted him as a running back, but he had like 20 missed tackles forced. Just kind of like they drafted a football player. Feels like a Detroit Lion. I thought he was going to be like a really good safety, but they announced him as a running back, so he's probably not playing defense. But I'll be special teamer right away. But again, just I thought a nice draft for them too. And Tampa Bay, sneaky good draft. Barton, who fell, but they needed help on the interior offensive line. They grabbed Broswell, the other defensive end edge rusher from Alabama, who's like uber strong. And I think was it Tyke Smith probably plays a lot of safety for them this year. And Jalen McMillan can be a nice little slot from the other Washington receiver. So yeah, Tampa had a nice draft. So yeah, some teams that I think improved their chances, and Latu and Mitchell for the Colts. I don't think the rest of the Colts draft was fantastic, but Latu and Mitchell, where they fell, I thought was pretty nice too. So yeah, interesting to see what happens there.
Yeah, you hit on the rest of my winners there. And the Steelers, I mean, they're going to win 8 to 10 games. I mean, just like it's inevitable. They're going to beat some teams they shouldn't beat and lose probably 1 or 2 games that they shouldn't, but they're just going to play great defense. They're going to run the ball an unbelievable amount. And if Justin Fields plays, I mean, they might have fewer than 20 pass attempts every single game. I mean, it's borderline inevitable at this point. So yeah, I don't know. I think they're going to win plenty of games though. It'll be just full boomer ball because now they're set up to dominate.
Yep. No, I think it's gonna be interesting. You want to look at some odds? We'll bring up the odds screen and look at some stuff here. We get some questions in the chat we can get to as well.
Yeah.
We can make let's see here. Let's share this. Bring up these 2 bozos. All right. What do we want to look at here? Obviously, we're going to touch the Super Bowl. But let's look on some. We'll touch on whatever you wanted to touch on. I'll look at the odds screen for it. What are some of the futures that you like? Whether it's a win totals.
Yeah, I would go to win totals. I got a couple there that I thought were pretty interesting, especially because you can kind of like, I don't know, you can just see them all together in one spot. By the way, this tool is free over at 44.com. Just go to betting, and then I think it's futures table is what it's called.
Yeah.
Future odds under odds. But first one, Cardinals over 6.5 wins, I think is interesting, even at -140 at Caesars. I think they did a really good job last year overall, like kind of maximizing what a little talent they had. And now they have way more talent. Marvin Harrison Jr. is there. Just like I thought that was a fantastic pick overall, and then continue to address their needs throughout the draft. So I don't know. I guess they were probably a winner that we probably should have touched on as well. But I think that they're just in a really good spot to bounce back and win 7 to 8 games. Any Cardinals takes, or are you pretty much in line there?
Yeah, no, I like the draft. I mean, they get, Marvin Harrison coming in, and you get healthy Kyler. I think that they played hard for that staff down the stretch. I thought was really interesting with a pretty shitty defense. So yeah, I think that there's definitely a ton of upside there. And I think maybe there's a chance for some of the other teams in the division to be going the other way too. So yeah, I think that Cardinals don't love laying that type of juice obviously at this time of year, but I'm with you. Like, could be a spot where it's trending to get up there. Like, Caesar's gonna have a flat 7 for us soon, basically.
Yeah. Oh, almost certainly. And then Falcons 9.5 -120 at Caesars. I mean, I
It's
don't
a good
know.
play.
Like, it just, again, they're going to win a lot of games. I mean, they're still a good team. Even if we disagree with the Michael Penix pick, I think they're still very, very well set up to dominate their division in my mind.
By far the easiest schedule in the entire league as well.
Yep.
They play the South NFC South plays the NFC East and the AFC West. Which again, you obviously get the Chiefs in there, but the rest of those teams are beatable. Their unique 3 are Pittsburgh, Seattle, and then on the road Minnesota. So not not easy teams, but not super daunting for the Falcons there. But yeah, I mean, obviously, if we see what we think we're going to see from Kirk Cousins, they can unlock some of the stuff. Maybe Kyle Pitts becomes a guy. Obviously, Drake London can ascend, and Bijan is exciting. It's a good offensive line. Yeah, I mean, that division is pretty rough.
Yeah. I think those two are interesting. We talked about already Bengals under 11 flat at Caesars. Again, that's more of just like a price play. I thought was kind of notable. Broncos under 6 flat at Caesars is both solid, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And then Vikings win total moved up. It was 6.5 pre-draft, now 7.5 at FanDuel. I think it's a little too high. I mean, I get it. I think they do have some good parts of their roster. It's just seems to be a lot of faith in JJ McCarthy and Sam Darnold in a tough division. So like, yeah, I mean, eight wins for a Vikings team with one of those guys at quarterback just seems a little bit rich in my mind. But I don't know. I think the juice is pretty heavy though on it, I think, at this point, right?
Yeah, under 7.5, -142.
It's not that bad.
Not too bad. Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you. Like, I don't hate Minnesota's team, but just you're banking a lot on either Sam Darnold or a rookie quarterback. I just so surprised with what they were able to get out of that defense last year. Brian Flores did, and I think they had a nice offseason. They added Jonathan Grenard from Houston, and obviously Dallas Turner, Andrew Van Ginkel from Miami. They kind of revamped edge, even though they lost Daniel Hunter. So yeah, kind of an interesting team there for sure. I think there's the range of outcomes is pretty wide, but again, I think we kind of agree that they're the worst team in the division. Yeah. And that's you're gonna have the worst team in the division still win 8 games. That can happen, but it's hard. So
yeah, it's not easy. I mean, last one that I had was potentially that's more of like a lean. Commanders under 6.5 wins. I don't know. 6.5 seemed like a lot with a rookie quarterback and Jaden Daniels, who I think there are more questions about than what most people are giving credit for. I mean, I don't know. It's not like he's like stacked with an awesome supporting cast either. I think it's very much fine. Cliff Kingsbury experiment. I feel like we've kind of already seen that not work out. So maybe he's adapted his game, but I don't think that's a given by any means. And so you're throwing a quarterback that was really like an essentially late breakout in a lot of sense, who had like amazing talent, like amazing team around him, and obviously excelled, but still made, he runs like very aggressively for a guy who's, built like a string bean. I mean, it's just like his injury risk is very high. And so there's just a lot of factors that I think are not playing in Washington's favor here, especially if the New York Giants show any kind of a pulse. I mean, that would be, I don't know if they will, to be honest, but
right.
like they could, like it's still in the range of outcomes.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you there too. I think that there are I have questions at least. I think it could be very exciting and we could be wrong, but to assume that he hits the ground running, Again, he will hit the ground running. It's just how hard does he get hit when he hits the ground running, because he's there's some bad decisions in terms of like slide, get out of bounds. Some of that stuff is going to be those are mistakes you only make once in the NFL. So yeah, that's an interesting call out too. Some other ones that I like. What you're going to just hear this from me relentlessly for all off season, man. I don't know how to do it. And Patrick's talking about in the chat here. I'm not sure what the best way to do it. He wants to talk about, can you assure me that Anthony Richardson will be healthy for the entire year so I can obliterate his over 525.5 rushing yards prop? I cannot assure you that he will be healthy for the entirety of the year. But I promise you, if he is, this Colts team's winning at least 9 games. And sneaky challenging, maybe upside in the division. I think Houston's really good. I think Jacksonville is going to be in the mix. But I think there are different ways to play that. Maybe I wouldn't do, maybe you want to go for offensive player of the year or something like that. I can't, you cannot convince me that we get 17 games of Anthony Richardson and he is not just insanely special from just an offensive production standpoint. Now, this is a dude that really struggled to stay on the field last year. Concussions, injuries, not great, but man, AD Mitchell is a nice addition there. I think the defense they added a lot of young guys in the last couple of years in the draft that I think could be interesting. I'm bullish on the Colts. Plus money at 8.5 on FanDuel is an interesting look for me. So any Colts, you throw some cold water on Anthony Richardson or anything on the Colts?
No, I mean, you've been a day one Richardson truther, even when I was a massive hater. Shane Steichen, I think, is just like very underrated. Like, I think he's like super underrated coach at this point, because we didn't get to see the full season of Anthony Richardson. Like, it immediately became apparent to me what he was doing with Anthony Richardson in game one, of the way things were schemed up, was just like, it was different. It was special. It was just like things were clicking immediately with like a very middling receiving core. And now Josh Downs kind of came on throughout the year. You add AD Mitchell, who at worst can just be a clear out guy, like a good clear out guy. I mean, like, I think he's more than that, but like, whatever. He ran a grade 40, can at worst just like run wind sprints and open up the field for Downs and Pittman. I mean, like, that's, I think, a really great addition as well. And so, yeah, I think I'm more interested in like Richardson, player of the year, 50-1, 40-1 MVP is possible. Just kind of maximizing that range of outcomes. I mean, I don't understand how Justin Fields can be 16-1 or 20-1 last year, and Richardson this year is like 40-1 or 50-1. Like, I don't necessarily know that either of the odds are fantastic, but like, it's, to me, I think Richardson has already shown that at least he could be a capable passer and a runner, whereas that was not necessarily shown with Fields at all. So I don't know. Just I'm not sure, but week-to-week basis, probably, Patrick. That's what I would say, is like week-to-week basis, alts, just like alts on his rushing. Basically every week we might just play it until he's like dead, like until he's not playing anymore, just bang the alts.
Right. Him back, the end of having Jonathan Taylor back, and what that does, obviously, what we've seen historically with, running backs able to do with strong running. I mean, Alfred Morris is like the biggest jag of all jags and put up some like monster numbers in Washington when we had peak RG3, just the threat of the quarterback keeping the ball. So as you mentioned, like they have nothing but like big freakish athletes at tight ends. Nothing that's really good, but then now they've added to the wide receiver room, and Downs was better than I think we thought. And then AD Mitchell, and this is a really strong, maybe one of the best defensive lines in the league. Really good linebacking core, good edge rushers. And now they add, Latu. Like, there's just a lot that I like about this roster. I mean, I was a big Juju Brents guy in last year's draft. He struggled to stay healthy last year, but just size freak athlete at corner, who I think could be really good. So yeah, I'm bullish on the Colts, and I really like the Texans. They're going to be, I think, probably good chalk. You see here 9.5 wins juiced to the over, 10 flat. It makes sense. I understand why that's there, but I think the Colts are probably my preferred team that can get in the mix there and complicate things. And I don't know if that's the best way to do it, or if there's other ways to do that stuff with offensive stuff. I Slack messages, leave me alone. All right, some other stuff that over under. So you mentioned here quickly, and I want to get your thoughts. Talk to me about the Chargers. I don't know what to make of the Chargers. I don't think the roster is particularly good. The quarterback is. The defense is not. And like another team that I think just up front, this is what we had in years past. Like, I don't know, up front for the Chargers is bad. They need Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa to stay healthy and be special. The secondary continues to be a problem of questions at corner. And then obviously, like Ladd McConkey, I think is a nice prospect, but is he your wide receiver one? He might be. They basically took the Baltimore's running backs with J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards. I don't know what to make of that. I don't know. It's a tougher division. 8.5, 9s. What do you think on the Chargers?
Yeah, I kind of like the over in some ways, just because, well, a couple of reasons. Like, I think that we saw a little bit last year with like the Rams, in the sense that like one dominant player, and they have two dominant, like extremely dominant players, can kind of keep all ships afloat in some senses with some good scheming surrounding it. Obviously, again, wasn't just, Aaron Donald, but it was like, good scheming as well. Like, I think that combo is very much in play for the Chargers, who have a couple of really good pieces and a couple of very, very bad pieces. And so, like, I think on the defensive side, they're not going to be good, but I don't think they're going to be like horrendous. And then offensively, again, you have a guy like Justin Herbert. I think you're implementing just a better offensive system. You upgraded the offensive line a little bit. I like Ladd McConkey a lot. I think that he was extremely underrated. He tested well, which is like really only my question was like, would he run like a 4.6 or a 4.39? He ran a 4.39. I thought that he was underrated as like a separator. Will he be like an alpha wide receiver one? I'm not necessarily sure, but I think that's like kind of interesting as well. So if they establish some kind of running game and like some kind of system here on the ground, I think it opens up so much more for Justin Herbert and the passing game to be like way more efficient. So like that kind of like balance here, I think matters a lot. And it's something that doesn't really, I don't know, it hasn't really added up for other coaches, but I just, with Harbaugh and like everything they're bringing here and like some of the players they brought in, to me, that's not a Final Four. Maybe they're winning 9 games this year, and maybe their upside isn't super high, but like, I just feel like they're trending very much in the right direction here of playing maybe older school football, but something that I think will work given kind of some of the personnel that they have.
Yeah, I mean, I like what you said with the Rams corollary, basically, right? With Stafford just leveling everyone up, kind of high tide raises all ships kind of situation. And that could be the case. I mean, I don't have any, no one's arguing that Justin Herbert's not special. And obviously the upgrade at coaching, Patrick mentions in the chat, the Chargers have been hampered by terrible coaching for a very long time. Hard to disagree with that, but another team that they got to find ways to stop other teams from doing the same thing that they're doing. It could be one of these spots where like Chargers games are over a half an hour before anyone else's games are, because both teams just were able to run the football well over and over again. And then all of a sudden, like, why is that game over? It's like, well, no one stopped the clock for 25 minutes. They just were able to run, because I worry about the Chargers run D.
Do they play the Steelers at all this year? I mean, that would just be like
that's a good question.
35.
They do.
Legendary.
They do. They play AFC North teams.
Let's go. That's awesome.
Yep.
All right. Well, that's going to be a just straight up terrible game, but it'll be great for some unders, some nice juicy receiving unders. I'll be excited to play those already. We're not started, but
yeah, I just interesting. I'll mention a Charger thing. This is maybe be a comment on a different show. If they're okay, because I think these things probably correlate. Junior Colson, linebacker from Michigan, who they took in the 3rd round, obviously played with Harbaugh. Junior Colson has a really nice path to maybe day one work. He is 50-1 on DraftKings to win Defensive Rookie of the Year. Shaq Leonard is the only linebacker to win Defensive Rookie in the Year in the last decade or so. But there's a chance where, Junior Colson steps in and is just compiling tackles right away, because the guys in front of him aren't really guys that we need to be super concerned of. And the defensive line in front of him is going to allow a lot of running backs to get to the second level. So he'll have some chances to compile tackles there. So that's an interesting look. And again, when you look at that market, it's edge rushers. I think they've won 5 out of the last 8. It's definitely been a trend, but at 50-1 for a guy who could be approaching 800, 900 snaps. That's a pretty nice number. So Junior
mean,
Colson's an interesting look.
This defensive class too is pretty weak too. Like, I mean, this is like, it's not like there was any, like locked in. I mean, the first defensive player was picked, what's
15? Latu, yeah.
Latu? Yeah. And then it was Turner 17. And then it's like a bunch of corners and maybe some edge like Jared Verse. But like, I don't know. Like, it's definitely, there's not like an alpha in this class. So if he racks up like 100 something tackles, I mean, I don't know. I don't hate it at all. Maybe I'll put a little sprinkle on it.
Yeah. It was 65 on MGM when it opened. And not everyone was out with him yet. And then that's moved down to 40, but still 50 on DraftKings for Junior Colson. So see other win totals. Let's look at some division stuff. Another thing that I love this market that MGM puts out, but I just wish that another book did it, because like the MGM thing, right? I mean, they do these like top 2 finishes, just more outs, which I think are interesting. But let's look at the division winners. So this is interesting in the AFC real quick, because I know we're running up to an hour here. A couple that I wanted to highlight. The Jets are so tough, man, because like
I'm betting it.
Okay, I think it's a good price too, 240. I know we're taking a risk of a 40-year-old quarterback who's doing shrooms and running for vice president, is coming off of an torn Achilles, but like, I don't think you can make a case that the Bills are as good. They're just not. They had to cut a bunch of important players, and yes, they have the best player in the division without question. Miami, I've already touched on. I didn't like the draft. I have questions in that apparatus can continue to work like it did. The Patriots are not sniffing any of this. So it's the Jets who have maybe the best roster in the league. Maybe it's a really good roster. It's really good.
Their defense is awesome.
Defense is awesome. So I mean, it's definitely in the team picture. It's a top 5, top 5 offense, or top 5 unit in the AFC for sure. Plus 240 to win the division. I think it's a good bet. So I like that you're on it too. Feel better about that. We haven't talked about it.
No, for sure. That was like on my short list, I think, of division winners potentially.
Yeah. I think you might disagree based off of our earlier talks. I like plus 170 on Cincinnati to win this division. I worry a little bit about Baltimore, what they have going on there. And I just think it's a better number on Cincinnati. I think this is the way to approach Cincinnati, because we can, they can win 11 games, win this division, fall short of their win total, but still be in the mix. I have concerns with Cleveland, who is probably interesting at 6-1 comparatively. Pittsburgh, I think, is going to be better. I don't think they're winning this division, but I continue to remain bullish on Joe Burrow and company. Any thoughts on that one?
It's fine. I mean, I don't know. It's not my favorite. It's not. I just don't know. I guess that's my thing.
For sure.
I'm just not sure, because I think the Browns are probably a little underrated at the current price. I mean, I don't know.
That's fair.
It's like they have good, but I'm not. Also, don't really want to bet them 6-1 to win the division, because the Bengals and Ravens are both very, very good. I just, I don't know.
Yeah. This is Colts. If you wanted to do the Colts thing we talked about earlier with Richardson, plus 340 is a way to go about that. Not sure that I love it. I don't know what to do with the Colts. I just know I might want to do some Richardson specific stuff. Like, this is going to be like minus 400 at some point, isn't it? For the Chiefs to win this division? Like,
I mean, probably has to be, right.
Right. I mean, obviously can't advise laying 225 in in May on a division winner that's going to pay out in January, but it's a Pat Mahomes injury bet, basically. Yes or no? Does Pat Mahomes get injured? Minus 225.
And even without him, like, they'll find a way to be somewhat competitive in this division.
Kind of agree. Yeah. Defense is really damn good. And yeah, I felt like last year we all kind of agree that they were early in terms of like some of the other roster spots defensively and stuff, and they went out and were still pretty awesome. I don't have a great thought on the East, NFC East. Any thoughts?
Honestly, not really. It's kind of the top and the top 2, the bottom 2. It seems like a coin flip between the top 2.
I agree. They are probably well positioned. We talked about the Falcons minus 120. Probably just play the win total, right?
Yeah, most likely. I mean, I don't know. I guess the Saints or Bucks could be interesting, but I don't know. I'm not buying the Panthers resurgence yet either. So
no, I've not heard that. I would not buy it if I heard it. So this division is fascinating, as we've talked about multiple times. You touched on Bears, probably division win is probably one of the better ways to go about this and making, based on some of the other stuff being already baked into the market, 370 on FanDuel, 375 on MGM if you have the option to do so. But yes, this is going to be these matchups are going to be great this year. I can't wait for it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think we're going to get like 8 games in the season. And it's going to be like, why, why are the Packers materially better than the Bears? I mean, I don't have very many good reasons about why they're much better than the Bears right now. And I just think that this is not a reflection of that at this point. And maybe the Lions have a couple of dudes, obviously. They got, plenty of good players and they're probably better on paper overall, but like, I don't know. I think we might get there eventually.
Yeah. Again, you won't be able to do this, but let's see what the NFC North top 2 finish. Yeah, plus 110 on the Bears. So that would be your way to do that.
Yeah.
NFC West is going to be the Niners. Again, you're laying massive juice, but I feel like that's another one that's, I feel less confident than the Mahomes bet basically. But I don't know. I'd be more interested in anything. I'd be interested in the Cardinals at 13-1 to win. I don't think they're going to win the division, but if some of them were to go sideways on the Niners, like the Cardinals could be in the mix, and I don't think they're priced appropriately for that. So that would be all I got.
Yeah, I don't mind that. I mean, Purdy. Well, the thing is that the Niners are just built so anti-fragile. Like even if Purdy goes down, like they've shown that they can throw any Joe Schmo in there and be at least decent.
Yeah, I agree. All right, we will obviously spend the rest of the off season doing more and more of this as we go along. So we appreciate you hanging out with us today. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel before you take off. Head over to 4for4.com/plans. Scoop up the betting sub. That way you get all of the premium content that we do this season, gets you access to everything that we do. So if you're not just betting, the betting sub gets you access to best ball content, DFS, season long, all the stuff that we do on the site, get you in the Discord and get access to all that we're doing. We're going to VR back soon for, we're going to have first hockey bets, hockey draft, NBA draft, MLB drafts, all that stuff is coming soon. So I don't know if we're going to do shows, but we'll definitely have VR in Discord pumping up picks. So take advantage of that. Promo code VR with the betting sub over at 4for4. So, all right, buddy. Anything else for the people?
No, we'll have to do an NBA or hockey show just to do it and listen to VR mispronounce every single person's name.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
Every Russian hockey player and like European basketball player. I mean, there's just like, he's going to go over. I mean, no shot he gets a single one right.
No.
It'll be like my mock draft, it'll be just straight misses.
Yeah, it's good content. So, all right, appreciate you hanging out with us. For Connor, I'm Ryan. We'll see y'all next time. Thanks, everybody.